Hi there. I've talked a lot about being blue in America. I haven't talked so much about being black in America, and that's what I want to address today. And it's really interesting because I've been accused of being obsessed with race, of being obsessed with being black. And I saw a meme the other day that really resonated with me. It said, accusing someone black in America of being obsessed with race is like accusing a drowning person of being obsessed with swimming. And I feel that's true. And I want to talk about the arc of the history of my life as being a black person. Now, when I was a little kid and I first understood that we were identified as black, it was confusing to me in several ways. One is I didn't understand why skin color was so important that we had to put a label on people just based upon their skin color. I mean, after all, we don't call blonde people blondes and blue eyed people blue eyeds. We say they have blonde hair or they have blue eyes. Similarly, I thought, well, I happen to have dark skin. I didn't see it as an identifying thing. I was also confused about this idea of race because I thought it was just based on skin color. And my mother is very light skinned, and my little brother is light skinned. So I remember, I don't know how old I was. I was probably 9 or 10. I remember asking my mother, why are you white and Brent white and daddy and I are black? Because I thought it was based on skin color. Now, I grew up in the early 60s. This is around the time, I guess, when I was becoming conscious of language, when people started using the word black. And I remember my mother specifically did not like the word black. She would say, my skin's not black. So we went from being Negro or colored to being black. And then we became African American, which also confused me because I'm not from Africa. Now, I do have ancestry from Africa, as do probably most people of colored black people here in America, as we call ourselves. But we're also mostly a mixed heritage. A lot of us have European blood in us as well. And this goes back to the one drop rule, which was when people said, okay, well, if you have one drop of black blood in you, and actually it was any blood in you that was not white, you were considered to be whatever the lower class was. So anybody that had any ancestry of African heritage was considered to be black, which is also really interesting because I'm a descendant of Thomas Jefferson. And I remember going to a family reunion several years ago at Monticello and looking at the cross of these people in the room of various shades, completely different shades. But a lot of people that looked white, perceptibly looked white, were actually black because they found out that their great grandfather was black, for example. So this whole idea of race confused me. It saddened me that people wanted to put this label on me because I just wanted to be Brian. And I have to admit, I think for a long time I was probably in denial about being black because it made no sense to me. It's a social construct. It's not who I am. Now, I went to, when I was in junior high school and high school, I went to white schools. I listened to white music when I was younger. When you turn on the television, you're looking at white people, actors and actresses, etc. So I speak the way I do, and I had people tell me that you speak like you're white or you act like you're white. And I remember when I was in my early 20s, I was dating someone. I don't think I'll ever forget this day. She said to me, "Why is it that you're afraid to be black?" And I really took offense to it because I didn't feel like I was afraid to be black. I was just being who I was. And of course, I'm part of the dominant culture. I speak the way that people around me speak, listen to the music that I listen to, etc. And that sometimes can be perceived as wanting to be white or being afraid or being ashamed of being black. And there may have been a time where that was true. But then I realized, again, probably in my mid 20s, early 30s, it's like I'm going to be who I am. And part of who I am is black. Whether I like this label or not, it's a social construct that doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't mean it doesn't impact who I am. And it impacts the way people behave toward me. I remember one time, it was probably in junior high school, and I went to a friend of a friend's to their house. Their dog was barking at me like crazy. And this person said to me, "Oh, I'm sorry, my dog is barking at you. It's probably just because I've never seen a black person." Now, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. And it was interesting. This person would have had a dog that had never seen a black person. But also, when I was bused in junior high school, as I mentioned earlier, I went to white schools because of segregation. I was bused across town. A lot of the kids I went to school with didn't know any black people. So I was treated very differently. People would put their hands in my hair. They would ask me stupid questions about what it meant to be black. So I was made to feel different. So that's my experience, then. And then I went to work for IBM. One of my first jobs out of school was my first sales job. And, I'm a black person. My family, everybody in my family has or had a mustache. Everybody in my family has facial hair. It's part of who we are. And IBM they didn't like facial hair. They discouraged facial hair. So I was caught in this situation. It was like, am I going to shave my mustache and be someone I'm not to try to fit into this culture? Now, it was interesting. I never did really well at IBM. I did great on my numbers. I made club 7 out of 8 years. I made quota all the time. My customers loved me. But there's always this thing about like, Brian, you don't quite fit in. You don't seem to, I remember one time one of my managers said to me, you even he said, like, I think he said, use the word like a little bit gray, which is really interesting, the term that he used. But I never quite fit into that culture because I was going to be who I was going to be, and I would not try to be something that I wasn't. So this is the thing about being a black person in America. It's a really interesting experience. For a long time in my life, as I said, I kind of rejected it. I'd say when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I started to embrace it. Now, when I was a kid, we had this term black pride, and I did not understand this term. Like, why would I be proud of being something that I didn't do? I didn't create. I didn't create myself. I didn't make myself black. I did not understand the term. Once I started studying black history, now I understand the term because our people have been through an awful lot, and it's created a tremendous amount of resilience in us. I think a certain amount of grace that we tend to have, the ability to endure, which is resilience. And I remember one time talking to someone, and they made the comment to me about black people and having these characteristics. And it's not a genetic thing. It's not like black people are superior in any way at all in terms of physics or physical aspects or genetics. But I think it's the collective trauma that we've been through that has helped us to grow, forced us to grow, and made us who we are collectively. And that I am proud of. I am proud of my family. I just went to my Uncle June's funeral this past Saturday. And I looking around at my family, my mother's family. My grandfather was a coal miner in West Virginia, a segregated state. My grandmother is from North Carolina. And I look at my grandfather's 10 kids and what they've done and how successful they've been, the legacy of my grandfather. I'm very proud of that. On my father's side, my other grandfather was a pastor. I'm very proud of my father's family. So I'm proud of what our family has accomplished, given the circumstances that we all deal with. Now, a few years ago, I taught a course called Overcoming Racism. And to prepare for that course, I did a lot of studying about the history of America, history of black people in America. And again, it kind of reinforced some of the things I already knew about this construct. And I learned that when Europeans came here to America early on, before that, as Tim King said there, I always get his names confused. Tim Wise, Tim King, I can't remember, but he's a white guy that knows all about black history, and he talks about before this, Europeans hated each other as much as they hated black people, but when they came here, they came this classification called white, and it's like if you were a white person, whether you were Italian, Scottish, German, whatever, at least you're better than the black people. So that's when that category came about of white and then white versus black. And then I learned about things like redlining, which I hadn't really learned much about in school. And I learned about all the things that have been done systemically and systematically to black people throughout the ages, which explains why we are where we are. A lot of times we can look around and say, why do black people have 1/10 of the wealth that white people do? Why do black people make 70 cents on the dollar compared to what white people make? And you might think, well, maybe it's because black people aren't as well educated, or black people don't work as hard. But a lot of it is generational wealth that goes back to policies in the 40s and the 50s and still things that go on today that keep us separated and keep us held down. So these are things I think it's really important for people to understand. And what I want to wrap up here with is I'm recording this not too long after the election. And Kamala Harris in my opinion, well, I think it's objective, but Kamala Harris was more qualified than Donald Trump in pretty much every way imaginable and did not win the presidency. And, it's interesting because we've got this intersectionality of Kamala Harris with being a woman of color, black and Southeast Asian, and also being a woman, of course. So when we look at Hillary losing when she did to Trump, again, I think more qualified. We saw a woman losing to a less qualified man. Now we did have Barack Obama winning the presidency, so we saw a black man winning the presidency. So what message does it send to all of us when someone like Kamala can't win the presidency? So for me, it's another example of how black people, women, have to still be 10 times better than white people to get the same position. So as I go forward with the podcast, I will be talking about politics, but I also want to talk about race because it's a big part of who I am. It's part of shaped who I am, and it's not part of myself that I am going to deny anymore. And so that'll be a part of the podcast going forward. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Has anything in this surprised you? Anything you disagree with? Should I not be so focused on race? Should I just do like or be like Martin Luther King says, and we just judge people on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin? It's funny. I can't tell you how many times that's been quoted to me, and I tell people, yes, I long for that day also. I can't wait for that day, but unfortunately, it's not today. Have a great one.